Good evening and welcome everybody to the Loft Line podcast tonight. We've got two special guests with us. We've got Ian Evans and John Waters. Um,
All right.
so you know, and Jamie Langrish and obviously Tom Roskell. So for everybody who's watching, we want you to get involved tonight and send us some questions and some messages in, and we'll try and get through them all. But please keep it all respectful. Do you know what I mean? This is a chat about moving things forwards, and we don't want any idiotic comments. You know what I mean? Because you'll get no likes for idiotic comments on here. You know what I mean? You'll just get switched off. So try to make everything, you know, sensible and let's have a great show. So welcome Ian, welcome John.
Thanks, lads.
Thank you for getting the time to come and chat with us tonight, and we're looking forward to this. It's going to be one of our best podcasts. I'm thinking. What are you thinking, boys?
Yeah,
I think it'll be good. Yeah,
good.
We hope we live up to that, Bob.
Well, yeah. Well, so if you could both give us explain what you are and what you do, and what you've done, and then everyone can get a proper insight. So, eventually, who you are and what jobs you do. So, if you want to start, Ian.
Okay, yeah. I'm Ian Evans, as you can probably tell from my accent. I'm from South Wales. Been around pigeon racing all my life. My father raced pigeons. Uncles, cousins, both grandfathers raced pigeons. I've been racing pigeons on my own right since I was 9 years of age. I'm now 50. Yeah, I know I look a lot older, John, but yeah, I'm only 50. So I've been racing a long time with varying success. And as people probably know, I was chief executive, general manager at the time of the RPRA. I think I took the job up in something like 2016 and left in 2022. I've done various roles within the pigeon sport. I'm still secretary of my local club. I'm NFC marking station IC for Wales. So yeah, I've done lots of different roles.
Okay. Hi lads, I'm John Waters, and I've held quite a few roles within the pigeon admin over the last few years. I've been secretary of Western Region RPRA, I've been president of the region, I've been a councillor for the RPRA, and I've been vice president of the RPRA. And I just think tonight's podcast is going to be really useful for obviously gaining information for the fanciers on how the RPRA is run, and just to give it a bit of an insight behind it all.
Good, right? Thanks, lad. So just before we went live on air, John, you was telling us about the people that work for the RPRA and the people that make the decisions at the RPRA. Yeah. Now, I myself, and I think Tom and Jamie maybe, we didn't even know this. So, could you explain that to us, please, mate? If you don't mind.
Sure. It was just obviously I tuned in last week to listen to your podcast last week and some of the questions that were coming through. And the one thing that struck me was to highlight that there's two parts of the RPRA, to be fair. So we have the RPRA employees, the ones who are employed by obviously the members and the association, and they're the ones that do the really hard admin work for the sport, gets our race up every week, organises deliberations, etc. And in my opinion, they're really, really hard working people, and you have the other side, which is the RPRA council, who was elected by the membership to run the sport. So I just think when people mention the RPRA, sometimes if they're a bit despondent about the sport, they can blame the RPRA staff. And I think that's a bit unwarranted, because they don't make any decisions for the sport. Obviously, the appointed councillors, who I must point out are not paid. Obviously, they get expenses for going to the meetings, but they are not paid. So again, I think that's a bit of an unfair misconception to the councillors. They're not paid. They get their expenses, which I think they should do if they're going to travel to meetings, but they are not paid. So, but that's where the decisions on obviously the future of our sport and everything else gets made at council. So I just think it was important just to make that obviously break between the two.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thank you. So Tom, did you have some questions for Ian tonight? Did you say?
No. I've just, like I say, I think the best job is to let Ian explain and John to explain through the RPRA before, because a lot of them questions will get asked rather than me asking questions. I think it'll solve a lot of questions.
So let's jump right in and say, where do you see the role of the RPRA now, Ian? How do you see it going, and how do you think it's doing?
Well, a couple of questions in one there, but I'll try and address them all. Where do I see the RPRA? I mean, a lot of people say, what do the RPRA do for us, and is there a need for an RPRA? The answer, in my opinion, definitely. There is a role for the RPRA. And I know there are competing unions and other unions, one of which I'm a member of down in South Wales, obviously Welsh Yeoman Union. But I do see the RPRA as kind of the ones that lead the sport in a certain direction. That's purely from the size of it and the resources it's got at its disposal. And I don't think, people have spoken to me in the past saying we need a new union, we need a new association. I disagree. I think what we need to do is improve the RPRA and improve it so it represents the membership in a better way. I don't think we need another organisation. And one of the things I wanted to make the point about is Pigeon Pathways, which hopefully we'll talk about later on. I know John has been on to talk about before. A couple of people have aimed in my direction saying that it's been set up to compete against the RPRA. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because I wouldn't be involved in it if that was the case, because I think the last thing we need is to segregate the sport anymore. Pigeon Pathways is there to try and complement what the RPRA do, or do what the RPRA no longer does in terms of trying to promote the sport and increase participation. I think none of us are under any illusions that the sport isn't going to get back to the heydays. Or if I can remember in the 80s, when I was a young lad racing pigeons and used to race in a federation with 25,000 pigeons in South Wales, great competition, great days. Those days are sadly gone. But what we can do, and I'm a firm believer of it, because we've been involved in projects in the past where we've introduced the sport to people and people have actively taken it up as a result, which wouldn't have, because they simply don't know the sport exists. So the trick is to get out there and bring it to the attention of people and try to get, if you take it to 200 people, you may get one person who's interested and takes it up. But that's a success. And the key is trying to take it to more and more people, to get more and more people to take it up, while recognizing and accepting the heyday's probably behind us, but we need to secure the future of this sport. And that's one of the major failings I see about the RPRA, is its action in terms of trying to secure the future of the sport. And a lot of the content of or some of the comments that come from some of the councillors, and not all of them, because there's some great people on that council, who give up their time and try to do the best they can. But it's almost an acceptance that this pigeon sport has no future, and that really gets to me, and it's not something I'm willing to accept.
Yeah. I think it might be quite pertinent here as well, just to explain the current structure on, because I think a question came up last week, guys, of how are people elected onto council?
Yes.
And maybe the long-winded way of doing it. Do you want to do it, or would you like me to do it?
Well, I'll do it, John, but you step in, because again, you've been more involved in that side of it than me, but I can give a bit of an overview of the way I see it. I mean, we have a rather cumbersome approach to electing people to represent us as members. We have 13 regions, I think I'm right in saying, John, isn't there 13 regions? Yeah. And depending on how many members are in each of the regions, they can appoint between, well, it used to be 3 when I first started, but between 1 and 2 members, maybe even down to 1 for each region now, to represent all the members within that region. But how the governance structure of the RPRA is set up is you have the 13 regions, which in effect appoint representatives to sit on the council. And the rules of the association is such where it says the council have ultimate control over the association. So picking up on the point John made earlier about staff have no say on, well, they can have a say, obviously, and they can recommend things, but they can't make any decisions themselves. All the decisions are made by the council. And I think the issue is you've got a tiny proportion of the people involved in the regional structure, because at the end of the day, you've got to have a meeting in your club, discuss what's on your agenda at the RPRA, send a delegate to the region, attend the region meeting, which may be a couple of hours round trip on a Sunday afternoon. A lot of people are put off by that. So what happens is the regional structure, where is actually the power base of the association, where all the decisions ultimately are made, is only representing a tiny proportion of the RPRA members, because simply most people are not engaged in it. Because, and I mean, people put it down to apathy and different things, and to a certain degree that's correct. But at the same time, I think we need to stop hiding behind the fact that people can attend these meetings if they want, and try to make it far easier for people to have their say.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the apathy in the sport as well. It's whether people don't know about the meetings, but the regional meeting. Let's talk about the Western region. It's attended by very, very few. So a decision comes from that meeting to go to council. There might be 6 or 7 people voting on that. So yeah, it in effect it's representative of the whole region, but it's not. It's only representative of the people that go to the meeting. So
Yeah.
them 7 people could be representing 1,500 members in that region.
Yeah.
But if the members don't have their say, then really, so they can hide behind the rules saying this is the structure, so you are representative of the region. In theory, yeah. In fact, it just
No,
doesn't happen
no,
like that.
no.
So, you've got a small nucleus of people making the decisions for the majority. And I think that's where the one member, one vote would have been really useful.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
everyone would have chance of a say,
And I think,
and
Yeah, well,
and I think-
that's what I was saying last week. I thought if they could put something online, the what they were going to vote on, and everyone just got a chance of a yes or a no, and it'd go massively towards whoever turns up to the meeting, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what we did. We did try, Jamie. We
Right.
tried to get that rule through that you could vote online. You've got a loft number. You only need to register your loft number.
Yeah.
So you couldn't vote 10 times. You could vote once with your loft
Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we were hoping that was going to be successful, but it got overturned, and it got overturned by council, didn't it?
Yeah,
Right.
we had a couple of stabs at it, really. I mean, while I was in the job as CEO, we had a go at rewriting the rule book and bringing in one member, one vote. It didn't get very far, to be honest with you, and quite a failing on mine and the rest of the people's part, really, because we didn't really get the message out to the members and try and encourage them to go along to the region meetings for that one time to vote it through. Because I'm firmly of the opinion that if you had a one member, one vote basis, you take the association and the sport in a totally different direction. And again, I'd like to split the RPRA, I suppose, because I think we need one rule book for racing and we need another rule book for the business of the RPRA in terms of running the business. I mean, It's a rather cumbersome governance structure where decisions take months and months and months to get done, where the opportunity or the threat has already arisen. And that should never happen. And I think we need to move to a basis where we have, rather than a council that only meets twice a year, we need an executive committee approach where you've got a small amount of people empowered to make decisions on behalf of the members, but that are democratically elected by individual members rather than regions.
Yeah.
And we had that in COVID. When COVID hit, I will take my hat off to the council. They made a decision to impose an executive committee under the emergency rule 142. Basically gave myself, John, who was vice president at the time, Gary Cockshott, Paul Hammond, and David Bridges, who was the president. Basically, not carte blanche, but power to make decisions because we were in COVID and in some difficult situations. And that worked really well because John will tell you, we were meeting every other night on Zoom, having conversations like this, discussing what was coming out from the government in terms of the restrictions. And, I think it was successful from the point of view, obviously, it shows that because we were the first competitive sport underway during COVID, which just goes to show that when you give a small group of people who are there for the right reasons and willing to put the effort in, what can actually be achieved.
But I must say, obviously, Ian, you've got to take the large share of that credit because you did most of the work. But it does show that a small committee can make decisions a lot quicker than a bigger committee, and that was the way forward. And it showed that it could work because there was something that came out maybe 10 years ago. It was called the Hall Report, and what the Hall Report did, it looked at the whole RPRA, how it was run, how it was structured, and came up with a report. Yeah, it cost £10,000, but it was a brilliant report on how, as a business and as a sport, we could move forwards. And council decided that they didn't want to, because they didn't like what was in it. They decided they weren't gonna run with it, and it was just thrown out. But obviously, I seen it, Ian seen it, and it was the best report on the sport that we could possibly have ever had.
Yeah,
in theory, John, the 10 people will see the £10,000 thing. It's a lot of money, but if it wouldn't have been in the long run, would it? It would have saved a lot more than that.
Some for people, obviously, I'm not a business person, but it made sense. Everything it said made sense. And because a few individuals wanted to protect their roles, they got up a campaign to obviously get it thrown out. And that's what happened. And I don't think it was the fancy that threw it out. I firmly believe, and I can be slated for saying this, that it was council that got it thrown out.
Yeah, I totally agree, and you know, I agree that not everything in the All report, but 95% of it is something I wholeheartedly agreed with. And to be honest with you, it was part of the reason I decided to take the job, because I went for the interview, and when I was offered the job, I really still undecided to take it, and I wanted to speak to the consultants. I knew they were preparing the report, and I wanted to speak to them before I took the decision to take the job, because I wanted to know what direction the RPRA was going to go in. Because naively, I thought if the council have gone to the trouble of procuring these consultants to produce this report, whatever's in there, they're going to implement within reason, obviously. So I spoke to them, and everything they said to me that was going to be in the content of the report made total sense to me. And it's the reason, really, I decided to take that leap of faith and take the job, because I'd spent 6 years previously working with social enterprises, which are businesses like Pigeon Pathways, which in all essence, the RPRA that's what it is social enterprise. It's set up for its aims and objectives to provide the pigeon sport with a governing role, I suppose. And it's not there for anybody's pure profit. So, you know, that it was disappointing, to say the least, that they was chucked out. And again, what's more disappointing is it wasn't the members that made the decision, and it's the members that should be making these decisions.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think, obviously, if you split the business side away from the RPRA to the sports side of things, I think that's where the main concerns for the members are. Obviously, liberation sites, hawks, the membership. See, that's all down to the council structure. Right? I won't say council per se, but the council structure, and that's where all it's such a cumbersome. So, say for instance, Jamie, you have an idea of, I don't know. Let's just say, for instance, the fee should be 20 quid, just for say for that. So you then have to call a club meeting. You've then got to get your members to agree, then send that to the region. The region meets, has to agree on it. And then when they agree on it, it goes to council. And then basically, in effect, the membership's supposed to obviously agree that. So you can see how long it takes for an idea you may have to get to the end, and it's a long process. And I think people look at it and think, you know, I can't be bothered.
To some people, it's not worth it, is it? You know, I mean, you know, some people have these great ideas and they can't act upon it because the hurdles are being put in front of them all the time, aren't they? And people, and when you go to someone and say, listen, what do you think about this idea? They go, well, you know, we've made ideas in the past and nothing's got done. And that's what makes people be that way, isn't it? Because, you know, they never see anything getting done.
No. But I think if you want to change under the current system, but it can be done, but it takes people to just make a bit of effort. You know, and I think change within the RPRA is probably the easiest process on paper, because if you get enough people to a meeting to vote it through, and then you get enough people at the region meeting to vote it through, and then enough people at the council to vote it through, then it goes through. That's the system, you know, but it's getting people to attend the meeting, which is the hard part.
How many council members did you say, lads?
Sorry, what was that about?
How many council members is there, did you say?
When I started, there was 22. I think it's down around about...
I think it's possibly 13 now. I think it's possibly 13. one per region.
Per
region.
Think it is. But right.
Yeah. So they're elected at the region meeting.
And have they been doing this a long time, most of them?
Some have, yes. So some of them have been doing it a really long time, haven't they?
Yeah. And you know, I'm smiling because not because I think those people have been a long time shouldn't have been, because a lot of them, you know, they've made a hell of a contribution to the sport. They really have, you know, and they come in for a lot of criticism, and they've come in for criticism from me. But at the end of the day, they've been there year after year. Yeah, you know, and we've seen the RPRA through some rocky times. But the reason I'm smiling is because from my time there, which was only 6 years, I seen some people come out the council perhaps in a lot of occasions, younger people with some real, something about them, I suppose, where they, they're there for the right reasons and they really want to make change, and they try to make change, but they just get beat by the system, and you don't see them. You don't see them there for long because they just think, I'm just wasting my time, and I agree with them.
I think I was one of them people, Bob, Jamie, and Tom. I went there with the bestest of intentions to obviously try and improve the sport, and whether you're successful or you're not successful, there's something in the sport for everybody. And I wanted other people to experience what I've experienced. You meet some great people, you have some really good laughs, and I wanted that to last. So I tried to get involved to try and make it the best we can. And then in the end, I gave up, and whether it should have or shouldn't have, because you feel like you're banging your head against the brick wall.
Well, maybe say, don't they, when you keep banging your head against the wall, after a while it hurts, doesn't it? You know what I mean? I tell that to some of the boxers that are trained. Listen, lads, I'm banging my head against the wall. It's starting to hurt. So, you need to change. I mean, we're finding out things that we didn't know now, aren't we? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me, sat here listening to you lads, something has to change, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's quite important as well at this stage. I think Ian touched on it earlier on, but the CEO, general manager, or whatever you call it, like I've worked with quite a few of them now, and each one of them must feel like they're swimming with lead blocks on their feet. Because again, they have no decisions. They're invited to the meeting and they don't get a say. They're not entitled to a say. So
they seem to be the ones that take all the slack, John.
Exactly.
Or often the CEO. It's out of what you've just said there. It's out of their control. They're just a voice in a big room, aren't they?
Yeah. And as I say, it's the council that run the RPRA. And I think it's even written into the rules that the Ultimate Safety Association is down to council.
Well, I remember Ian when he took the job on it as CEO. He had a big mop of curly hair and look now.
He said now he's not going to get it done again.
That's what I'm saying. Something has to change, and without casting any aspersions to anybody, it's got to be at that council level, hasn't it?
I think it doesn't, Bob. I think it needs to happen at the regional level. And I think before we come online, I touched on it. Myself and John were involved in a bit of a campaign, which came in for a lot of criticism from some senior councillors, because I couldn't affect change from within the RPRA while I was employed with them. So we thought we'd try and do it while not working for the RPRA, if you like, but knowing the ins and outs of it. We thought it might help because, I firmly believe things need to move, and they need to move in the direction of every member, one vote, voting online, rather than having to give up a day of your life every couple of months to go to the region meeting. So we got together and we rewrote the rule book to implement the one member, one vote basis and the executive committee approach, which was so successful in COVID and everything. And, we prove works as opposed to and it proves it works. And that was what was disappointing to me. Even though we proved it worked, people on the council were still against it because obviously where there was 20 of them at the time, there was only going to be 5 or 6. So some people thought perhaps their nose was being pushed out. Yeah. So coming back to it, but ultimately the power base is the regional level, because ultimately it's the regions who in theory, doesn't always happen, but in theory mandate their councillors, and their councillors have to vote the way they've been mandated by
the way they say.
So it's a way. So if you get people to go to the region meetings, which is what we tried to do, we did a few videos like this talking about the proposals, what the proposals meant, what the strengths of the proposals was, any weaknesses that are in there, any concerns we had about it, even though we were the ones putting them forward. And then we tried to encourage people to go to the region meetings to vote the propositions through. So we did it quite easily. We came up with a document, which is basically a rewritten rule book, which people could download, send into their regions and put it on the agenda for discussion and a vote. So we managed to get it through, and the Welsh region, I went along there, the Welsh region proposed it, put it through the AGM. The East Midland region proposed it and put it through to the AGM, but overturned it at their next meeting when they come to vote on the propositions. Even though they're the ones proposing it, they voted against it because basically they got more people to go to the meeting and vote it out. So that vote basis, then I think the voting was something like 13-7 against the changes. So, but he was, I think that was an achievement, getting 7 votes in favour of it. And it just goes to show what can happen, But the trouble is, people still think from the point of view, well, why are they going to all this trouble trying to affect change? Wasn't it for them? And there was nothing ever in it for us. We are still passionate about the sport, and we're passionate about the RPRA as well. We think the RPRA, as a place, but it needs to be working far more streamlined, it's far better, and represent its members' feelings far better.
Absolutely.
See, that can be a problem, can't it? People think that when you're trying to change something, you're doing it for an ulterior motive. It's the same in boxing. It's just what you're talking about. It's the same when we go to the British Boxing Board of Control and we have the meetings there. When people are trying to move the shows and the dates of shows and trying to move shows from different areas, they think they're doing it for their boxers, and it's exactly the same because people are so suspicious. So if we could find a way, like you're saying, where everybody could vote from the home without having to do anything, without having to literally go anywhere. If you could just read it and then vote on it, that'd make it so much better, wouldn't it?
And the thing is, well, we're all members of banks, building societies, whatever, and at their AGM, you always get a letter with the propositions on, and you can pop them in the post and have your say in the bank. Whether you choose to or not, that's a different story, but you get the opportunity to do it.
You can do it,
and that's what we need to do. And just to touch on the point just previous, and obviously I came on here to talk as honestly as I can. You mentioned about when you do something positive, people are a bit suspicious because they think you're in it for an ulterior motive. And the reason being, in my experience, is because the people making the decisions are there for that reason, and then they get suspicious of other people because they know they know their own tricks best. And I think that's exactly it in a nutshell, and that is coming from the heart. That I truly believe that's why people are suspicious, because they've had it their way for such a long time, and it's this, we fear change, we do, and I think that is it in a nutshell. That's probably not going to be popular in certain quarters of the sport.
It doesn't matter when it's the truth, is it? It doesn't matter. The truth is the truth.
That's it. We need to be in a position where we can improve the sport for the members. That's what everyone I speak to wants to do. I think, people talk about the Raptors, and yet there was Ian might know more than this, there was a fund to look at the Raptors, but people saying, what are we doing with the Raptors? And I think Ian is the perfect person here to talk to about this, because he was involved in a trial case of trying to prosecute someone who put artificial boxes up, but Ian can explain it more. But he can explain the complexities and the difficulties of taking on the RSPB and whatever on this case. Can you remember that one?
Yeah. I mean, the Raptor Alliance was set up way before my time started, and I can remember paying it into it via the WHO, because I think all the unions paid into it, didn't they? And I know there was a hell of a lot of work was done before I came anywhere near the RPRA with regards to try and get changes to the Wildlife and Countryside Act to basically give pigeons a bit more protection. And there was a great proposal put forward, but nothing ever happened to it. There wasn't the political support for it, I suppose. And I think, again, that's part of the weakness we had, really. So we set up, while I was there, we set up the all-party parliamentary group for pigeon racing. I don't know if any of you can remember that. And we had a couple of Conservative MPs who were very supportive, but we had MPs from all different parties. We had a couple of parties, we had a couple of Lords on there. And basically, he was there because most sports and most businesses have representative bodies within politics. So the idea was we'd have a voice within Parliament, and then we tried to do a bit of PR around it. If you remember the Lords versus Commons pigeon race that we resurrected after 100 years or something, and we had a liberation where every Lord and every MP had a pigeon, and we organised this race, and obviously there was a winner, and that was raised in Parliament, so the pigeon sport was raised in Parliament, and everything was going along in in the right direction there. But again, as a sport, it's disappointing that we were trying to encourage fanciers to write to their MPs and join the APPG, because the more MPs that were supporting it, the more chance we had of getting things through from a political point of view. And I'll say chances, because there's never any guarantees with this, especially politics. We all know what politics is like.
Yeah.
But so that was disappointing, and that was difficult. But the point that in hindsight, that we could have done things better ourselves, I suppose. But what John was mentioning about the test case, there was an idea put forward that perhaps these nest boxes that are put up on public buildings, or any building, in fact, there's no like licensing or anything around it. There's no consultation of anybody, the public, pigeon fanciers, who it's going to affect. Anything else in life that you do, there's got to be a consultation process.
Yeah,
people. Nothing like that ever happens. These people just give them carte blanche to go along, put a nest box up without any consideration for what negative impact they may have on anyone. So there was the idea that we'd try a test case and we'd take it through court. So what we managed to do, we managed to get some rings recovered from one of the nest boxes. One of the rings in there was a guy in Aylesbury. I can't remember, apologies, the chap's name. So we approached a couple of people who had rings found in this nest to say, look, the RPRA, the Raptor Alliance, will pay for the test case, but are you willing for us to use your name? Because the pigeon is you a pigeon, so we can't do it.
Yeah.
It's going to be you. And this chap, he was all for it, and he was really keen about it. He was on the phone nearly every other day asking for updates. But we were finally getting to a situation where we had a case ready to submit, and unfortunately, the chap passed away. So we had to start all over again, and then COVID hit, and other things come along, and it never really got off the ground again. But that's something, I think that should be picked up again and should be looked at, because, again, we got different legal opinions on it from barristers and different things. And although, again, they can't give you any guarantees, they say that, in some people's opinion, there is a case there, because the erection of that box has had a negative impact on you because it's taken your pigeon and your property.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So that's, because you, like you're saying, you just can't do things without asking for permission, can you?
Yeah.
In a nutshell, you just can't do something without asking for permission, can you? You can't just put.
Yeah, they should at least be looking at it and saying, well, if we put this box here, what negative impact is it going to have? Well, obviously, we know it's going to have a negative impact to the pigeon racing community, and even the people who put these nest boxes up know that's the case. But there's never any consultation around it. They just do it.
Yeah. We can't even put a pigeon loft up in the garden without asking for permission now, can we?
There you go. Yeah,
exactly.
I think the cost to go to court and everything else is just astronomical. You know that in everyday life. So I know there was quite a bit of money in the wrap, but it wouldn't have probably supported a court case.
Well, the RSPB, they've got deep pockets, haven't they? Do you know what I mean?
They've got millions and millions of pounds, but you can't take these people on. So I know people, obviously, it's a big problem for everybody, but in the defense of the RPRA, I think they've tried what they can legally, and it's, they've got to be seen to be doing the right thing. And, it's so expensive to go down that avenue. But
you're right, John. But I think where these nest boxes are concerned, you need to forget about the RSPB and the RSPCA to a certain degree, because they're not in theory responsible for erecting them. It's the local little peregrine groups, community groups, who are in theory got the funding and put them up. So the test case would have been against these guys, would have been normal guys like you and I and the rest of us on this meeting. They're not going to be, some high flyer in the RSPB or DEFRA or APHA or anything like that. They're going to be normal people who are just interested in this peregrine nest box. And it was them we were going to be taking to court. Now, there's nothing to stop the RSPB and everybody else putting their money behind them, I suppose. But ultimately, even if you do it and you fail, it's going to send a message to these people to say, and other people, if they know that, they're thinking, hang on, do I really want to be putting myself in this situation?
And what you're saying is you're just getting a free ride, aren't they? We're not saying anything, and they're just putting them up where they want. No one's complaining.
And no one's saying anything. Yeah. And isn't it? Couldn't you do something against the building, the people who own the building where the box is? Yeah,
I think they've been down that. They've been down that down that road, and it wasn't really successful. From a planning point of view, you're thinking, Bobby, and things like that, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of these buildings are listed buildings as well, you know. So you just to go and put a box on it. I mean, when I was there was one. A pigeon fancy got in contact with me. I can't remember who it was. It was on Bristol and Avon area. They'd learned that their local church was going to erect it. So I went down and spoke to the vicar and explained, you know, what impact this is going to have. And he turned around and said to me, he said, look, Ian, he said, it's too late now. He said, all the funding's in place. You know, it's there. It's going to happen. But if I'd known about this beforehand, I definitely would have had second thoughts about it. So I think there was an opportunity there. And we did. The trouble is, so I then had the idea we were right to every church and cathedral in the UK, which is obviously impossible. It's a stupid idea. But there is a representative body of all these. So we wrote to them and said, look, and tried to explain to them what negative impact it's having, and just asking for a conversation. But we never had it. We never had anything come back. But I think, you know, just if you make the general public and people in general, if you make them aware that this is having a negative impact on people in the way it is, not, you know, some of them are still going to put two fingers up to you and say we're still going to do it. But a lot of people will sit and listen to you. The trick is how we get it out there. That's the difficult part.
I mean, the members of I think members of the public now, I think they're more in tune with bad things happening to pets and everything. You know, you see that, don't you? There's that many Facebook pages, these Twitter accounts, is everything, you know, about, you know, bad things what are happening. And if we start to show them pigeons being attacked midair and pigeons getting hurt and stuff like that, I mean, I'm sure that would cause some kind of an uproar somewhere.
Yeah. I think it's how it's done. It is. That's the difficult part, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need to throw a lot of money at that in terms of getting the right people to do it from a PR point of view and that kind of way.
Yeah. Because
can I ask, sorry, Tom and Jamie, a question? You know, what future of the sport wise, what do you think we should be doing as a sport? You know, what ideas do you have? You know, where can you see where improvements could be made?
Go on, Tom.
Go on, Jamie. Answer the question, Jamie. Go on.
Go on, Jamie. You go first.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, I was wondering, like, I think your idea you got there, you know, about the one vote and all that. I think that's massive. I think because everybody, because what I would feel then doing my vote, I would actually feel like I'm involved and I'm making the decisions. You know what I mean? I think everyone, even an old fella sat at home, they go on about computers and stuff, but everyone has access to it now. Everyone's got a granddaughter or a son that can get hold of the phone. That's not a problem now, all that sort of stuff. So I agree. I agree fully that we need to make it more about individual votes. I like that idea. I said it last week before I knew about your thing I wrote, and I think it's got to be more like that. That's what I think.
Yeah,
I think we should have. I think there should be. I think every club should have a social media presence nowadays.
Yeah,
I think every club should have somebody delegated to. I think let's say every club has a Facebook page.
Yeah, I mean we can even go as far as saying like every Fed company to start with. Every Fed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, you could start with every Fed, but I think if every club had a Facebook page, and you're putting it on the excitement of the racing on Saturday, because you know for years and years we've been seen as racing pigeons. Racing what? What do you mean racing pigeons? I mean, I've been in America, obviously training lads in America, and people say, "Oh, what else do you do in England, coach?" I said, "Oh, keep racing pigeons." What do you mean?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And then you explain it to them, and then people are always intrigued by it, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are.
You do what? You know what I mean? My partner Sharon, she works at the co-op funeral service, and every year she does a thing for charity through the co-op funeral services. When we start racing, the first 3 races, she kind of sells a pigeon to all the people in her works, and they all buy a pigeon each, and they all put some money in over the 3 races. There's a winner and that gets some money, but the rest always goes to charity. Now, I'm going in this year before this starts to the co-op funeral service with a few pigeons and doing a talk about pigeons. And I mean, when we open that WhatsApp page for that, I mean, these normal people who know nothing about pigeon racing, they go crazy for it. You know,
Yeah.
they all want to come to the loft and see the pigeons, and Shannon's friends at work so all want to get involved. And so I've seen it happen. I've seen with social media and with just a WhatsApp page. They all name their own pigeons and stuff like that, and they all really, really get involved. And so I've seen it firsthand of what social media can do.
Yeah.
And obviously I've seen it with the job being a boxing coach. I've seen the power of social media. And I know that if every club could take it upon themselves to have a Facebook page or a social media presence, that would start something massive.
Yeah, the only problem is getting public that don't know anything about pigeons to actually go and join them pages.
Well, they would because we only advertised it at Sharon's Works a couple of years ago, and it went berserk. There's people on a waiting list now
To do what?
To get involved in the pigeons.
Yeah, on the betting side of it.
Yeah, well, it goes to charity anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's just. But they want to get involved and look at it and see how it goes. And we do, Sharon sets loads of videos and puts them on the WhatsApp page, and they all see what's going on and they all love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, and I firmly believe that the longer we're not on social media, we're missing out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Bob, and that sounds great, like you've done. I mean, my experience is probably very similar to yours because, different places I've worked, at some point somebody asks you what you're doing at the weekend. I say, racing my pigeons. And I say, what do you mean racing your pigeons? What's that? And you take time to explain it, and people are genuinely interested. And I mean, in the past, some places I've worked, we've put a syndicate together in the one Loft race where it wasn't successful. My bird was lost in the first training tosses, and they all despondent. But people are genuinely interested. It's just they don't know the sport exists.
Exactly.
So that's the difficulty. And I think years ago, I mean, I'm guessing you guys come from a similar background to me. I'm from a mining village in South Wales. And when I was a child, everybody went to the local workman's club. And where was the pigeon club? In the workman's club.
In the workman's club.
Shop window, so to speak. Everybody was exposed to pigeon racing.
Yeah.
But nowadays, people don't tend to go to the workman's club where the pigeon club is, or very few people, as opposed to years ago. So that shop window's gone. So social media and things like that are the way to go. And I think Dan, who's involved with Pigeon Pathways with us, and was practically the motivating factor behind setting it up. He's new to pigeons. He's only been racing pigeons about 6-7 years, and he stumbled across pigeon racing because he saw somebody on the side of a road training their birds. Stopped.
Yeah.
And asked them what they were doing, and it just so happens, he's that kind of guy who would be interested in this kind of thing, and he's taken up pigeon racing. And what Dan has done in a small period of time for the pigeon sport, and the members he's attracted to the sport, which he can evidence, is amazing, and it just shows what can be done. Because Dan set up, he's got his own business, tool making business, etc. But he's quite a talented filmmaker, if you like. So what he's done, he's videoed his journey, explaining what's happening in his pigeon loft. But rather than doing it from a point of view where we'd all be interested in, where you want to know what people feed in, what system they race in, it's none of that. It's the basic stuff and the questions that somebody who knows nothing about pigeon racing would ask.
Yeah.
And the number of people on his YouTube channel has come on and says, look, I've taken up pigeon racing because of you. I've watched this. It just appeared on my feed. I've watched it and I'm hooked. The number of people have done that because, he's selling it from more of a simplistic point of view, because pigeon racing is basically a simple sport, isn't it? We all make it complicated. We all make it complicated, but in essence, it's very simple and anybody can do it. So he's come at it from a totally different point of view. He's not laid, he isn't weighed down by all this baggage we've all got from being involved in the sport for so long. He's new, he's fresh, he's looking at it simple. And I think that just goes to prove, Bob, what you were saying, it works.
Yeah.
Lads, can I just ask a question? Do you think that obviously it should be down to the likes of Pigeon Pathways to drive this, or should this be driven from the top of the RPRA?
Well, what I've said from the beginning is I don't see the RPRA doing enough to get new members into the sport. I think there's nothing. You can get the Homing World and you can look on websites, and I've never seen the RPRA doing anything to get new people into the sport. Now, maybe that's just me, but that's the feeling I've got. That's what's in my head. I don't see the RPRA doing enough to the sport that how do I say it? The thing that's keeping their wages coming in, they're not doing enough to keeping that going.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, with one exception. And I mean, I'm not blowing my own trumpet here because I wasn't really the person behind it. I put the idea forward, but it's somebody else who will come on to who really drove it forward. But when I was there, again, in my interview, I was saying, look, we're not doing enough to promote the sport. We need to attract new people into it. So I wrote a little project idea around a development officer's role. And Richard Chambers, who you guys may or may not know, from the Chambers family, quite a successful long distance pigeon racing family in the Midlands. I knew Richard had started, I didn't know Richard at all, but I knew of him. I knew he'd started a school loft where he worked. He worked in the school. He was a PE teacher. And so I spoke to Richard, and he was explaining the success of the project and how, even I think he was even mentioning one of the ACAS reports where it was identified as a great way of getting children who had perhaps educational needs or behavioural problems. Their kind of academic results as a result of the pigeon loft increased tenfold because basically, they wanted to go to school, they wanted to be involved in the pigeons, and they were told if you don't start behaving, you're not involved in the pigeons, so to speak. So, it had a positive impact from their point of view, but it also had a positive impact from our point of view as a sport because not a lot, but some of those children took up pigeon racing or at least had pigeons they were keeping in their own right. So the idea was to basically replicate that idea, put some funding together, get Richard on board. Richard started working with the RPRA on a part-time basis to start with, and basically get out there, take this to the schools and replicate it as many times as we can. Now, we had a Future of the Sport fund, which was basically all the profit was coming from the RPRA One Loft race. It was basically going to this Future of the Sport fund. And although things were happening, very small scale, minuscule things, I said, look, let's put this money into this project. Let's employ Richard full-time. Let's get Richard out to as many schools as we can and set it up. And I think in a very short period of time, like 2 years, which is a relatively short period, we had 6 school lofts, all racing, all competing, some great stuff coming from the news, getting on mainstream BBC News, BBC Northwest, I think was Oswald Twistle School up there. They got on there a few times. So it started with building a lot of momentum and, but you had people hitting it from all directions because we had a budget of £60,000, £60,000 from an organisation that was turning over at the time 1.2 million. They were only putting £60,000 into it. Now, from my point of view, we should be putting more into it. We were proving it was working. And it got to the stage where Richard was inundated from schools because of word of mouth within the educational system about this school thing. But he was inundated. He's going and giving talks all over the country. People all wanted the lofts, and then COVID hit, and it came to a stop. It all came to a stop. But then what happens? Again, one of the reasons I decided to leave because they pulled the project. They just pulled it because they said £60,000 is a lot of money. Well, they'd rather waste £20,000 on meetings every year. That just doesn't add up to me.
No, that's the problem, isn't it? That is the problem. Meetings, cars, stuff like that.
There are things that have been done, but I think there's a lot more. They're not doing anything now. And we have approached them through Pigeon Pathways to say, look, this organization's been set up. We very much want to work with you. Can you support us with... We didn't even ask for them, and even if it was £100, we would have been grateful for a donation from the Future of the Sport Fund, where there's still money sitting there doing nothing, into the Pigeon Pathways. And basically, we've been blackballed. I think John, I'm right in saying, we're blackballed. We haven't been given the opportunity, really, in my opinion.
You gave an excuse there to not do the work. You've already set it all up. They to me, as a business like that, who obviously people are wanting this, and you've already set it up, it would be good for them to put the name to it. All the work's done, isn't it? A bit of money. You gave them a lifeline there, in my opinion, rather than starting it themselves.
I mean, what you don't realise is that money going to the RPRA, it's not a saving up club, is it?
No.
It's not like it's not their money. It's not like, oh, this is ours. You know, they should be speculating to accumulate, shouldn't they?
Exactly.
It goes back to the vote. We were saying one person per vote, and I'm pretty sure the way these lads have explained it tonight, if it went to every person one vote, they'd have all the funding within a week. If the pigeon fraternity voted, I'm sure they would, because I'd vote for it.
You see, the way. Sorry, John. The way I looked at it was right. We had. I can't remember any members of staff it was when I arrived at the RPRA, right? I did reduce the number of staff because we took some of the services online, like the transfer system.
Yeah,
where we brought our system in where it doesn't cost very little to run it. You know, so what was happening before? People were sending transfers in with whatever it was, £1, which wasn't covering the postage to send the two letters back. It was pointless. So rather than paying somebody to sit at a desk half a day, every day, 5 days a week, typing in transfers, I thought, let's take this online, free up that money and put it into promoting this. You know, and more services of the RPRA could be taken online, and more money could then be freed up to promote the sport. You know, you've got to speculate to accumulate, right, Bob? But it was just, we need to keep doing it. We've always done it this way. We need to keep doing it this way. Well, the argument was always thrown in our faces as well about, you know, the internet and how everybody's got access to the internet. It's nonsense. If you look at the statistics,
not anymore.
90% of 70-year-olds have got access to the internet. And
everybody's got a phone now. Everybody.
Yeah. And if they haven't, somebody in the family has.
When we send to the nationals and stuff, you know, you verify online and this, that, and the other. There's 90-year-olds doing it. Well, they're not doing it. Same again. They've got the sons, the grandsons. You know, they've got access to it. Definitely.
Yeah, everybody has.
Is there any questions in the background that we've not read out tonight before we lose John and Ian?
I've not seen any.
No.
No, they must be listening. They're listening.
They're all sleeping.
No, well, you know what? We're answering all the questions, aren't we? We're asking all the right questions and getting the right answers, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, honestly, I know I keep going on about it, but we need to strike while the iron's hot. We need somebody out of each club to have a social media presence. Imagine all the clubs having a social. Imagine if every club had, Byron Morris, how many active members are in the RPRA?
How do you define active? Actually racing pigeons or?
Yeah, people.
That must be what it means. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Byron Morris means lofts or people that actually race pigeons.
Or how many actually work there and getting paid?
No. How many active members are in the RPRA? Sorry, members of the RPRA.
Yeah.
That's a very difficult question to answer, to be honest with you. But I would put my neck on the line. I would estimate that it's probably not more than 8,000 actually racing pigeons, because a lot of the members of the RPRA are members because they have been for years. They perhaps packed in pigeon racing for health reasons, different things. They still keep paying their membership. You know, and again, you know, the numbers were skewed because, you know, you'd have Mr. and Mrs. Evans, for example, whereas actually Mrs. Evans has got no interest in pigeon racing at all, but members didn't mind paying £10 to keep their wife's name on the thing. When the fees went up, which they needed to go up, I'm not against that. What happens is people take Mrs. Evans off the partnership, don't they?
Yeah. I've seen that at a club level. I've seen that a couple of people in our club, just in a small club. I've seen that. Yeah. But, just another one to fire in that. And John mentioned it last week about we talk a lot about bringing children into the sport, you know, and youth and this, that, and the other. But in my area, especially, I've noticed a lot more people retired coming into it than youth. You know, maybe they used to race them and then they got a family and work, or they always wanted to. And I think once they retire and get to that age, let's say 65, we've had quite a few in our area retire into our area and take up pigeons. And I've noticed more of that end of the spectrum than the youth. You know, I don't know if you think the same.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, I think, you know, we don't just need to be targeting the younger generation. There is a huge opportunity to people who have retired and have spare time and a bit of spare cash as well. Some of them, you know, they're looking for something to do. You know, and there's all this good thing about social isolation now and trying to avoid that because the negative impact. being isolated and not mixing with people as well. What better way to mix with people than racing pigeons, All right. Some people may argue going to the club is not as enjoyable as others, but the fact is you get out and you go to the club and you're mixing with people, aren't you? That's the thing. And you build friendships and everything else, Can we? I don't know if this is time limited, guys, but can we just?
No, there's no time limit. You carry on, mate.
Just have a chat about please, maybe, because I noticed one of your callers because I watched your show last week. I noticed one of the people put a comment on the bottom saying they joined Pigeon Pathways and they hadn't received anything. We did send a newsletter out, winter newsletter, but for whatever reason, a lot of the members, including myself, didn't get it. So we've had a meeting with the guy who looks after the website and everything. We're trying to get to the bottom of that. So I just wanted to address that. But I also wanted to let you know, and John, come in when you want, what plans we've got. I mean, we are very much in our early days. We're all volunteers. We all got full-time jobs. We all try and raise pigeons as well. So the amount of time we put in is very limited. But we need to start somewhere. I mean, my vision is perhaps eventually we'll get to a stage where perhaps we can employ somebody to go out there and do a lot of this. And we'll just sit there, not just us, other people on the board, directing where it needs to go. But this year we're already booked into one national show, countryside show, and Matt at Eco Loft has kindly agreed to build a loft, which will be easy to go and assemble and take down to shows. We're going to put live pigeons in there, small scale stuff to start with, guys, in terms of just introducing people to it. We're hoping to get into another show, but also one thing I'm really excited about is we met with a student from the University of South Wales, and we're looking at building a virtual reality thing of pigeon racing. So the idea is you'll have, through the virtual reality headsets and things, you'll have the experience of being in a pigeon loft, going about your daily chores, looking after the pigeons, exercising them, training them, then a liberation, birds arriving back at the loft and what's happening, just to give people that kind of real life, experience without actually doing anything, going anywhere even, So that's one of the things we're looking at as well. But, we've got some exciting plans, but it's just, we need people to support us from the point of view of become a member, obviously, because with Pigeon Pathways, it is one member, one vote. When we have our AGM later on the year, everybody who's a member will have a say in the direction of the community interest company, and also if you can support us in any other way, we've got an auction coming up on Les Green's Northern Premier's site. I think it's going live tomorrow. Some fantastic lots on there. So if people can just, because going to these country shows is not cheap, guys. We need to get a bit of funds behind this.
Just a quick message off Alan Soft. What do the council members benefit from by being a council member? And do they vote for their own interests?
Yeah. Go on, John.
Well, go on, John.
Let me answer it as honestly as I can. Ethically, they're supposed to vote in the way that the membership have instructed them to, but both Ian and I have got experience of these people voting for their own interests, and I think that's the honest opinion. Not everyone, and not in every instance, but there has been incidents where they voted even against their own mandate. And to me, the best example of that was the Hall report. We had one councillor said he was mandated to vote against it and have it thrown out when he wasn't mandated at all.
That's
so, But
and what he should have been once that happened, John, and that was proved. Did he stay a councillor, or is he still there?
Well, he's not there now, is he? Not there anymore.
Right.
But
he's not there for that reason, though. It's
no. Yeah.
That's what you're saying. That's what we're saying about if we had one member, one vote.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That'd stop all that, wouldn't it? You know what I mean? And the councils are never going to vote that in.
Yeah,
but some of them did. That's the thing. To answer the chap's question, I think it depends on you as an individual. Because all those councils are obviously individuals. Some of them are there because they get the kudos. There's no doubt about that. Some of them are there because they think they can make a difference. But in my experience, they quickly lose interest because I did, quite frankly.
You're just banging your against the wall.
Because of the system. And other people are there for reasons I don't really understand. But I think one thing I want to get across is, I don't want to come across as negative of the council, because I think it's the system more than the individuals that's the issue. Some of the individuals are an issue, no doubt about it whatsoever, but I think it's the system that's the issue, not the people themselves. And, I see these comments all the time about people saying they're on a free ride, they'd have their hotel paid for to stay overnight. Well, let me tell you something. It isn't a free ride, believe me.
They start
the meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning, and very often they're running till 9 o'clock in the night. And the frustrating part about it is, I'm sat in those meetings as RPRA CEO, and you sat there and you're thinking, what's been achieved after 12 hours of sitting here and talking? Nothing.
Yeah.
And that's the issue.
It's like being at a Fed meeting. They're the same.
no one goes to them, did they? Do you know what I mean? It's like that. I
would say, in my opinion as well, it's definitely the system rather than the people. Because that is the system we have: club, region, council, and the system doesn't work.
How would we go about changing the system? How would we change this system, lads?
The ironic thing is, you've got to change the system by going through the system. So you're a hamster running in a wheel.
And that's what we touched on earlier, Bob, in terms of we tried to, I accept that the system is so cumbersome and so hard to navigate that people just give up. So we thought, look, let's have a real go at this last year. Let's give people the information so they don't have to go out the way. They just print it off, send it off. And so all we need to do is get people then to go to the region meetings just for that one occasion, just to vote it through.
To get it changed.
And afterwards, and it was successful. That campaign, I would call it a campaign. It was successful from the point of view that, it wasn't far off being successful in terms of the number of votes. But they failed because not enough members went to those meetings. Because if members did go to those meetings, I've no doubt in my mind they would pass. Because if you speak to everybody on an individual basis, like you guys, like we're talking tonight, everybody's in favour of a one member, one vote situation.
Yeah.
So we need to get it out there, don't we?
Yeah.
It's the fairest system you could possibly have.
So we need to get it out there to get all the members to go to the meetings just once. If you go to that meeting just once, and get it out there, after that we can all do it from being sat at home, can't we?
Absolutely. And I think obviously people got fed up on social media with me saying this. We can change the system, and that's all. I'd say it's 2 meetings, to be fair. It's your club, and then send your region delegate to that meeting to vote it in. And
so we need to send a message from the Loft Line podcast to all the clubs to try and get some feedback on this and see if we can do it, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So this would have to be put in it'll be next February now, unfortunately.
Well, it is when it is, but we. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. We could start the change from here.
Yeah.
Couldn't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, end of the day, how many times are we all going to see our club members now in the next 6 months? We're there every week, aren't we? So it's doable.
This is the time now to start talking about it at club level, start talking about it at Fed level, and then getting everybody to go and do this voting.
Yeah, and the thing is, Bob, there's only one person from one club that needs to go to that region meeting. That's all, just one person.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Delegated. But like I said last week, they have to be on board, don't they?
Yeah. Well, yes, they do. But
because you can be, like you said, you can be mandated to go, but you're only half-hearted about it, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You have to. The people that are mandated to go to these Fed meetings have to believe in what we're trying to say.
Yeah, and I don't think going to one meeting is too much to ask to get change, because it's easy. If enough people want change, change will happen. It is as simple as that.
Yeah. The pigeon revolution could have started here.
That's it.
We've heard that before somewhere. But no,
we could have. We could have started
as simple as that, And as I say, I hope people take away from this podcast that we are not blaming council, CEO, anyone.
Not at all.
It's the system that's wrong, and it's a system that needs changing. Otherwise, we'll always get what we've always got.
Yeah, we're living in an outdated system, aren't we?
Yeah.
And the system, like everything else, it has to be overhauled, doesn't it? You know, every now and again, it's got to be overhauled and it's got to be taken forward, because people are sitting there and accepting that pigeon racing is finished. And we've got to get that out of people's heads to say it's not.
One of the other positive changes I'd like to see happen as well, you know, we're talking about getting people into the sport, but I think from within the sport, things need to change as well. There's far too many small federations. There's far too many racing organizations, and they need to be almost made to get together in some kind of way. Made is the wrong word. Encouraged is probably the better word. I mean, I'm just using my own example down here in South Wales. Everybody talks the talk. Everybody tells you they want to be, you know, we should all get together. But when it comes to the crunch and actually doing it, you get a different approach. Some people, because they want to be big fish in small ponds.
Exactly.
But, you know, I think we need, from within the sport, to protect what we've got at the moment. We need to move away from this isolated case, and we need to get regional racing, proper regional racing, to say, if you're in this area, you can have your own federation results and wherever, but you're all going together, you're all liberating together, and you're all going to have an overall result as well. Because I think that has to happen.
Well, Tom was saying that last week, wasn't you, Tom? That you know, there's so many small clubs, and what people don't realise is that if we all went together, the birdie would be cheaper, wouldn't it?
Well, Tom, do you remember being in the Northwest Combine when you guys were in it up there? You know, if we had that racing every single week, you know, the racing would be phenomenal. Plus, it would reduce clashing, because if us here were sending 15,000 pigeons, people are going to say, oh, can't let ours go, we're going to hit 15,000 pigeons. It will reduce clashing. It has to, because people will keep away from larger liberations.
They're all going together, aren't they?
I agree, and I think also as well, technology. Bobby's mentioned the social media, but I think technology is coming into pigeons, and I think there's a lot of fight against technology. You know, I think to a certain point, I think it should be embraced. You know, things are changing, and I think technology needs to come forward in pigeon racing as well.
Just 1 second, lads. We've got user Mikey P, Mike PW4, and loads of other stuff. Can we have Chris Sutton, current CEP, on the podcast to explain what's happening to the sport and the RPRA? Well, if whoever wants to come on here, we're willing to have them on. So, you know, if Chris Sutton, if you want to get Chris Sutton on, send us the details and we'll send him an email and we'll see if he wants to come on.
You know, it's about putting your name on, you know, on the line. You know, Ian and John's on it tonight. They come forward, and I think they've been fantastic. You know,
and they're great guests. But this is what I started this podcast for, was so that people can get talking and people can get it out there. You know, people need to talk. I mean, so Neil Kershaw's put, why are we paying yearly fees that keep increasing when the RPRA are doing nothing? But Neil, I hope you've watched the podcast, because we've just explained all that. You know what I mean? We've just been explaining stuff like that. And it's not that they're doing nothing. It's the fact they're restricted in what they can do. Because it's not the RPRA that's broken, it's the system. Am I right?
Yeah. And I think when obviously people ask questions like that, Bob, it's the fee covers the salaries for the people who do the work, as in the office staff and whatever. So their wages are still got to be paid. You know, they've got to.
And the office staff don't make any decisions. That's what we said before.
No, and that's
so
what
we can't blame the office staff. Plus, you know, nobody works for free.
Yeah,
you see, I can see where he's coming from with that question. Perhaps he's asking it from a different angle, because none of us on here are going to blame the staff, right? And definitely not me, because I know what they do. Right?
Well, we're not here to do that. We're not here to do that.
But you know, he's asking why are they going up, and he doesn't see anything happening. Well, you might not see anything happening, but there's plenty going on. You know, I can tell you, Chris and the team there'll be plenty going on in terms of what they're doing every week. They're not just sat there doing anything. But the point he's making about it going up, I think perhaps it's more frustration, because I think the fees were so low for many years because they relied on the British Army Wheel making a profit to cover the losses at the RPRA.
Yeah,
when the British Army Wheel was no longer able to make a profit, then they had an issue. Okay, so then they had to put the fees up from £10 to whatever it was. We were telling them all along, you know, you need to put the fees up gradually every year. It never happened, right? To keep them at £10 or whatever it was. Ridiculous amount of money. But I think the other argument is that personally, I don't mind paying £50, £60 to be a member of the RPRA, as long as I can see that there's progress being made. Now, I think the fact is they're keeping a certain level of staff because they keep in the services very much paper-based rather than taking things online. So rather than reducing the overheads from a financial point of view with staffing and then putting that money in other things like promoting the sport and making the changes that the sport's crying out for, they keep on doing things in the same way. And perhaps that's what your guest was asking. And I think I totally agree with that because, you know, when I was there, we used the opinion, we made a couple of people redundant. John, you remember when we had that executive committee through COVID, we identified straight away the impact it was having on the British Army World, the fact they could no longer rely on the British Army World to cover the gaps in the RPRA. The RPRA needed to cut its own cloth. And the only way you can do that, you can keep putting fees up every year, but at some point it's going to get too expensive. So what our idea is put the fees up, because they were they were far too low. But at the same time, the membership need to see your overheads coming down, not just one direction of the fees going up all the time. Your overheads need to start coming down to meet somewhere in the middle. And that's what I don't see is happening.
Yeah.
Like
you're saying, there can be more done now online.
Yeah. I mean, that online transfer was so simple to implement.
Oh, it's brilliant. Brilliant as well. Fantastic. Everybody loves it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's brilliant.
You know, but like we was just saying, then there's got to be ways of cutting down stuff with nowadays, even with AI coming in. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? You know what I mean? This AI. You know, if you get on this AI and have a look at it now, I mean, we're all going to be out of work soon. You know, from
podcasters.
Well, you know, anyone can have my job. It's no problem. But yeah, I mean, you know, people have got to see change now, haven't we? We have to. It's not just us five here who's of this opinion. It's everybody is of the same opinion. So we've got to get together to get this one member, one vote.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if people don't go, then it's our own fault, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You know, we can't physically get people to do it. They've got to want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think there is a stumbling block as well with people that have been racing pigeons a long time. I feel that they've lost that spark. You know, some people are just getting up in the morning, going and cleaning the pigeons and going through the motions, and I think they forgot that spark. You know, that spark that made them want to do it. That spark of winning, and you know, I think, you know, social media and Facebook pages would help to bring that back a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, at the end of the day, nobody likes losing.
Yeah.
No.
Nobody likes to lose.
No.
You know. No. Just let me ask this question, lads. RL, I can't even read that. Oriel, whatever his name is. Sorry, my mate, I can't understand that. But could you ask the question, why do they call themselves CEO when they have no executive decisions to make changes? General manager's role would be a better description. But you did say that.
I think he said that before, general manager.
Come on, Ariel. Ariel, you need to watch from the beginning of the show. So go on, get it.
They don't call themselves CEO. That's the title that's given to them by the council and the membership, because the title CEO is written into the rule book. That's the only recommendation from the whole report that was implemented. Everything else was thrown out.
Yeah, the only one thing that come out of the whole report.
But the whole report was giving the chief executive more authority and autonomy to run the organization as a business. So they implemented the title of the change of the role in the name of the title, but not the rest, not the role.
Right. Well, I think that so the CEO takes all the slack in it. he can't do anything, but he's got the name.
Yeah, and that's it. Lads, it's been a great podcast, but I need to shoot.
Yeah, well, lads, listen, we've gone over, so listen, lads, that was absolutely fantastic, and thanks for coming on, and we'll try and get this movement started, I think. And hopefully people are going to start talking about this, you know, what one loft, one vote, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And thanks for explaining things to us tonight, both of you. It's been really informative, and I hope all the guests and all the people that have been watching have been informed as much as us. And thank you very much, boys. And I know
thanks for having us on, lads.
Yeah, and we'll get you on again talking about Pigeon Pathways. And anytime there's any news and you want to come on, just drop us a line and we'll get you on. You know, we don't have to be on the full hour a little bit. If you need anything to say, just tell us. We'll get you on and you can tell us what you need to say.
Yeah, Dan would be a great guest to have on, Bob, because you can talk about what he's done right from the bottom up, and you know,
great.
Be great for everyone.
Very informative. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Okay,
fantastic.
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thanks for everybody. Thanks for everybody who watched tonight, and keep hitting that like button and keep hitting that subscribe button, and thanks very much, everybody. Thank you very much.